Hello students, today we are going to start chapter number 7 of class 11th, that is systems of particles and rotational motion. But to study this chapter, first of all we have to discuss the concept of particles and system of particles. So we are starting with the term particles first. So the question is, what are particles, or how we can define a particle. Then to define a particle, we consider that we have an object whose mass is finite but whose size and internal structure is that small that it can be neglected. Then we call that object as a particle. So basically a particle is an object which has some mass but its size and structure is very small that it can be neglected. So we can define particle as a particle or an object whose mass is finite or defined but whose size and structure is that small that it can be neglected. Then we call it as a particle. Now as we get the concept of particle, we have to define the term system of particle or a system. So whenever we have a number of particles which are mutually interacting with each other, that is important. So a system is a collection of large number of particles which mutually interact with one another. Only then we call it a system. If we have a number of particles but they are not interacting with each other, then we can't call it as a system of particle. So for a system, we must have a collection of large number of particles such that these particles are mutually interacting with one another. Then such a set or such a collection of large number of particles is called a system of particle. Now since we have a system of particles, so there are two types of forces that are acting on that system of particle. So the forces acting there are two types. First is internal and the second is external. So internal forces are those which are exerted by the particles of a system on one another. Since they are mutually interacting with one another, so they are mutually applying force on one another. That forces are called internal forces. While if an outside agency is applying some force to that system, and because of that its kinetic energy or its velocity is changing, then such type of force is called external force. So we define internal force as the mutual forces exerted by the particles of a system on one another. Right? Such type of forces are called internal forces. Actually these are the forces which are responsible for holding together those particles. The forces that are acting between the particles, because of them they are collected, these are called internal forces. However, the external force is the outside force exerted on that object by some external agency, and these forces are responsible for the change in velocity of that object. So they cause a change in velocity of the object. Next concept that we have in this chapter is of center of mass, that we will discuss in the next video. So for that, stay tuned and keep studying. Thank you.